My mother looked at the man I was going to marry, smiled her most polished smile, and said it loud enough for every single one of our 26 relatives to hear. You'd really trade this family, this legacy, everything we built for you for a man wearing someone else's old clothes. A man with nothing. 14 people laughed. My father nodded, slow and satisfied, like a judge delivering a verdict. And I stood there, holding my fiancé's hand so tightly I could feel his pulse, ready to walk out the door, ready to burn every bridge behind me when an 81-year-old man in a wheelchair slowly raised one trembling hand, pointed directly at the suit my fiancé was wearing, and spoke 7 words that cracked the foundation of everything I had ever believed about my family. Your parents owe you the truth about that suit. The room went completely silent. Because the man who made that suit, my mother had spent 40 years trying to erase him from existence. And in the next 10 minutes, every lie she had built her perfect life on was about to come undone. In front of everyone. Asterisk if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you most. If you've ever stood in a room and felt invisible. Like your worth had to be proven. Like your choices were always wrong. This story is for you. Hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss a single moment. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. Because this story, it doesn't just have a twist. It has layers. And the deeper it goes, the more devastating it becomes. Stay with me. You won't regret it. Asterisk my name is Stacy White. I'm 30 years old. And I work in a world that most people walk right past without a second glance. I'm a senior textile curator at the de Young Museum in San Francisco. My department, costume and textile history, 1850 to 1980. My job, my calling really is to preserve the garments that other people discard. The dresses folded into cedar chests, the suits left hanging in estate closets. The coats donated without a second thought by families who don't understand what they're giving away. I see each piece, not as clothing, but as a document. A fingerprint left behind by human hands. A chapter of someone's life, pressed into wool and silk and linen. Every stitch tells a story, I always say. Every garment carries the memory of the person who made it. I had no idea that philosophy would one day lead me back to a grandfather I never knew existed. In 2024, I curated an exhibition called Master Tailors of North Beach, 1950 to 1980. It ran for 6 months and drew 15,000 visitors. During weeks of research, I came across 3 garments in our permanent collection, labeled Castellano, bespoke, donated anonymously in 2023. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, hand-stitched lapels with a precision that bordered on obsessive. Wooden buttons carved from California hardwood, each one unique, etched with a delicate leaf pattern. Every measurement so exact, so considered, that the pieces seemed to hold the shape of the body they were made for, even decades later, without anyone inside them. I wrote about those pieces extensively. I called the maker artist unknown, working circa 1970s. Exemplifies the pinnacle of Italian-American tailoring tradition. I spent weeks researching a man whose blood ran through my veins. And I had absolutely no idea. Asterisk let me tell you about my parents. Richard and Patricia White. Because you need to understand them, really understand them, to understand how a lie this large could live this long. My father is 68, retired from what he called luxury goods consulting. My mother is 64, a former corporate attorney. They live in Seacliff, a gated community with Pacific Ocean views, in a house valued at $4.2 million. Once a month, every month, they hold a reservation at Gary Danco, a Michelin-starred restaurant in North Point. Always table 8. Always the same reservation they'd held for 15 years. My mother always ordered Dover sole. My father, the Chateaubriand. They tipped exactly 22%, every single time. My mother had a saying she returned to constantly. Like a mantra. We appreciate quality, not sentimentality, Stacy. My father would add, almost on cue. Presentation is everything. People judge you by what they see first. They were polished, immaculate, controlled. And I grew up believing that the life they built was exactly what they always said it was. Hard-earned, clean, and entirely their own. I learned very early not to ask about grandparents. When I was 8 years old, I asked my mother about her parents, her side of the family. She was holding a wine glass. It slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. She looked at me with something I couldn't name at 8, but can name now. Fear. Raw, unfiltered fear. They passed away before you were born, darling, she said, kneeling to collect glass shards with trembling hands. We don't talk about sad things. I never asked again. But there's an earlier memory. One I carried like a splinter for years. I was 4 years old, playing in the attic of our Seacliff house. I found a box, buried under old linens, and inside it, a small vest. Navy blue. 4 wooden buttons, each button carved by hand, each one showing a delicate leaf pattern. Like something pressed from a forest floor. The fabric was the softest thing I had ever touched in my short life. I put it on. It was a little tight, even at 4. I stood in the attic holding my arms out, feeling something I couldn't name, something warm and ancient, and deeply right. My mother came upstairs. Her face went white. Where did you get that? She grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a mark. Give it to Mommy right now. That's old trash, baby. We don't keep trash. She pulled the vest off me and disappeared with it. 2 days later, I searched every corner of that house. It was gone. My mother replaced it with a pink Gap Kids dress. This is much prettier, sweetheart. New things are always better. I cried for 3 days. Not because I wanted the dress. Because I couldn't forget the way that wool had felt under my fingers. Because I didn't understand why something so beautiful could make my mother look so afraid. I met Alex Bennett in March 2024 at a museum fundraiser. He was 34, tall, and quiet. Wearing a charcoal gray vintage suit that fit him the way water fits its container, not forced, not stiff, just perfectly itself. While everyone else worked the room, he stood alone in front of a display case, studying a 1940s evening gown with the focused attention of someone reading a letter from someone they loved. After my talk on artisan tailoring, he sent me an email. Ms. White, your presentation was fascinating. I collect stories, not just garments. Would you have coffee to discuss the 3 Castellano pieces in your collection? I've been searching for his work for years. We met at Blue Bottle in Hayes Valley. Over the next 2 hours, he told me he owned more than 200 vintage suits, each one tracked down from estate sales, vintage shops, and private collectors across the country. Fast fashion killed craftsmanship, he said, stirring his coffee slowly. These suits are monuments to hands that cared. Every stitch was a choice. Every measurement was personal. The tailor knew their clients' names. They knew their children's names. That's what I collect, that intimacy. I understood completely. It was exactly the same thing I felt every time I cataloged a piece for the museum. The ghost of the maker still lived in the work. Over 10 months, Alex and I built something I had never had with anyone else. He lived in a Hayes Valley loft with exposed brick and morning light. He drove a 1985 Mercedes diesel, cream-colored, restored with love. We had picnics in Dolores Park, hiked the Marin Headlands, ate at tiny bistros where the owners knew him by name. I don't need new things, Stacy, he told me once. I need things made right. That car has 300,000 miles and will run another 300 because it was engineered with integrity. Same with these suits. Same with relationships. He proposed in December 2025, in the gallery where we'd first met. After hours, just the 2 of us under string lights. The ring was a vintage 1940s platinum band with an ethically sourced sapphire. He told me the price, $8,500 because he said, transparency matters. No diamond. I didn't want conflict stones. He understood without me having to explain. This was the man my parents were about to destroy at our own engagement party. When Alex met my parents for the first time in November 2025, I watched my mother's smile freeze over like a pond in January. What exactly do you do, Alexander? She asked. I work in textile preservation and heritage brand consulting, Alex replied. My father frowned. That's very niche. How does one make a living in that field? I do, Alex said simply. Afterward, My mother pulled me into the kitchen. Darling, he's charming, but is he stable? The pressure escalated after our engagement announcement over dinner at Gary Danko in December. My mother's champagne toast was tight-lipped. My father interrogated Alex about trust funds. When the bill came to $680, my father made a theatrical show of signing it. We'll be covering a lot of expenses, I imagine. Your vintage clothing business probably doesn't leave much margin. Driving home, I cried at every red light. Alex held my hand at every one of them. They're testing me, he said quietly. Let them. I know who I am. Christmas was a new low. Alex brought my father a first edition book on San Francisco architecture, $600. For my mother, Ju Wu Ling's Hermes silk scarf, from an estate sale, $800. My mother opened the scarf and her lip curled. Oh, how vintage. Richard, look, it's used. Patricia has allergies to secondhand fabrics, my father added. She doesn't. She has no allergies. It was a lie, delivered with the ease of long practice. Their gift to Alex? A $50 Williams-Sonoma gift card. Their gift to me. Opened in front of him was a check for $10,000 with a handwritten note, for your future sweetheart. Real security. 3 days before the party, my mother summoned me alone. To the Seacliff house. January light made everything look cold and beautiful. She slid an envelope across the glass table. Inside, $50,000 in cash. It's not too late to reconsider, she said. Take a trip to Europe. Clear your head. She opened a wooden jewelry box. A diamond necklace caught the light like broken glass. 28 carats. A Tiffany legacy piece. Worth $85,000. It could be yours. For your real wedding. To someone appropriate. I stood, left the cash on the table, and walked out. Her last words followed me down the hall. Don't say I didn't warn you. The morning of the party, my father called to tell me that a 52-year-old tech investor named Uncle Charles Harrington, $12 million net worth, Bentley, Continental, houses in Tahoe and Nob Hill would be attending. And that I should keep an open mind. Our own engagement party. He was trying to set me up with another man at our own engagement party. I texted Alex immediately. He replied 4 words. Let them show everyone. The Pacific Heights Club was the kind of place that made you understand why people spend there. Whole lives chasing money, 30-foot ceilings, crystal chandeliers from the 1920s, parquet floors that turned every footstep into an announcement. My mother had rented the chandelier room for $18,000. 18 bottles of Cliquot on ice. A string quartet playing Vivaldi. 26 guests seated at 8 tables. The room set at 68 degrees, cold as my mother's ambitions. I arrived at 6:30. The room was already buzzing with carefully managed whispers. My cousin Jennifer caught me at the entrance. Your mom said your fiancé works in vintage clothes, like he sells them online or something. He's a textile preservation specialist, I said, forcing my voice to stay light. Oh, she said. The pause did all the work. At 6:45, the room went quiet in that particular way. It does when something draws every eye at once. I turned and I forgot how to breathe. Alex was walking through the entrance, in the most extraordinary suit I had ever seen, outside of a museum case. Midnight blue, Italian wool, almost black in the dim light. Deep, saturated blue, under the chandeliers. A 3-piece bespoke. Jacket, waistcoat, trousers. The fit was perfect in a way that made modern tailoring look like an approximation. Shoulders, exact. Sleeves showing precisely a 1/4 inch of white shirt cuff. The drape was liquid. But it was the details that stopped me cold. Hand-stitched peak lapels with working buttonholes. A waistcoat with 6 buttons. A back panel and matching silk. Trousers with hand-sewn cuffs. And the buttons for wooden buttons on the jacket front. Each, one hand carved with an intricate leaf pattern, rich walnut. And not one of them identical. The suit was 58 years old. Not a moth hole. Not a loose stitch. The wool still held its sheen like it had just left the atelier. Alex kissed my cheek and murmured, "You said your parents appreciate quality? Let's see if they recognize it." I looked over his shoulder. At The head table, in a wheelchair, sat Grandpa Charles Bennett, Alex's grandfather, 81 years old, white-haired and frail. He was staring at the suit. His face had drained of all color. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly his knuckles looked like ivory. He said nothing. But he didn't look away. During the cocktail hour, the sharks circled. Uncle Charles Harrington, the backup plan my father had installed at the head table, sidled up with a glass of champagne. Interesting suit, Alex? Vintage? 1968, Alex said pleasantly, hand-tailored in San Francisco. Ah, Brioni, Tom Ford? Alex smiled. Better. This was made by a master. The whispers were immediate and merciless. Aunt Rebecca to my mother. Is that suit from Goodwill? Could the buttons look homemade? Cousin David to a friend. Dude's wearing his grandpa's old suit. That's kind of sad. A guest I barely recognized. I heard he deals vintage clothes out of his apartment. My mother pulled me into the hallway, her grip sharp on my arm. Did you? No, he was going to wear that. It's a beautiful suit, Mom. It's secondhand at our party. This is a statement, Stacy. He's disrespecting us. Or maybe you're disrespecting craftsmanship. Her jaw tightened. We'll discuss this later. Asterix dinner was served at 7:30. Oysters on ice. My father rose, champagne in hand, and the room quieted. We're here to celebrate my daughter Stacy, who's always had, let's say, unique taste. Polite, conspiratorial laughter. She's bringing us Alexander, who works with vintage items, clothing, I believe. More laughter. Louder. We're happy to welcome him. And we hope he can provide the life our daughter deserves. He raised his glass. 14 people laughed. 8 smiled uncomfortably. 4 didn't react at all. At the head table, Grandpa Bennett was staring at Alex's jacket, hanging now on the back of his chair. For a half second, the interior lining caught the candlelight, and I saw it. Gold thread. A monogram. GC I didn't know what it meant yet. But it landed in my stomach like a stone. Then my mother stood. She didn't announce herself. Didn't clear her throat. She simply started talking, and the room responded to her quiet authority, the way rooms always had. By falling silent, I need to say something. Because I love my daughter too much to stay quiet. What followed was precise, surgical, and devastating. She laid out the case against Alex, the way she must have once laid out arguments in court methodically, with a controlled voice that never rose, which made every word land harder. She listed his failures. No family name. No portfolio. No trust fund. No prospects. She called his career a hobby. She called his presence at the party an act of disrespect. And then she looked around the room and delivered the line that would undo her. You'd really trade this family, this legacy, everything we built for you for a man wearing someone else's old clothes. For a man with nothing. The room was a vacuum. I stood slowly. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I'm sorry. You feel that way, Mom, but I know quality when I see it. And it's not in this room. I reached for Alex's hand. Let's go. He stood, straightened his waistcoat. The motion made the jacket lining catch the light again. Several guests saw the monogram. GC, none of them understood it yet. My mother's voice sharpened. Stacy, sit down. Don't be dramatic. We turned toward the door. That's when the hand rose. Asterisk slow. Deliberate. Grandpa Charles Bennett in his wheelchair. 81 years old. Frail enough that the simple act of raising his arms seemed to cost him something. Wait. We stopped. His voice came out like iron through silk. Before you leave, there's something these people need to know. He pointed directly at Alex's jacket. That suit, if he's wearing that suit, your parents owe you the truth about the man who made it. The room froze. Every fork went still. 26 people held their breaths simultaneously. And then I looked at my mother. I had never, in 30 years, seen my mother look afraid. She could handle anything. Confrontation, loss, humiliation with that particular brand of controlled elegance she wore like a second skin. But in that moment, she staggered backward and grabbed the edge of the table like the floor had tilted. And her face was the color of bleached bone. No, she whispered. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. My father shot to his feet. Charles, this is not the time. You're confused. Grandpa Bennett's voice got louder. My mind is perfectly clear, Richard. Unlike your conscience. I walked toward the old man. My heart was hammering. Please, tell me what's happening. He looked at my mother. His eyes were sad. Tell her yourself, or I will. My mother looked at my father. Her whisper carried to the entire head table. How does he know? How does this boy know that name? What name? I demanded. What is happening right now? Cousin Jennifer stood up from her table. I want to hear this. Grandpa Charles has never lied about anything in his life. Two more cousins rose. Uncle Charles Harrington, the man my father had positioned as my replacement option, said quietly, Richard, if there's nothing to hide, let the man speak. The room split. Half the guests leaned forward. Half looked at their plates. My mother looked around at the faces she'd carefully assembled. The audience she'd built to witness her daughter's correction, and she understood. In that moment, that she was losing control of the room. I had never seen that before. Not once. Not ever. Grandpa Bennett looked at me. His eyes were kind and terribly sad. Your mother's maiden name, before she married Richard, was Patricia Castellano. Pause. Giovanni Castellano was her father. Another pause. Softer, more devastating. Your grandfather. Asterisk, the floor tilted. I heard the words. I couldn't process them. What? My voice came from somewhere very far away. Grandpa Bennett's voice was steadier now, gathering itself. Giovanni Castellano was born in Naples, Italy. In 1935, he immigrated to America in 1958, 23 years old, with nothing but his needle and his training. He was a master tailor, schooled in the old tradition, where every stitch is made by hand, every measurement precise to the millimeter. I couldn't move. By 1975, he'd opened an atelier in North Beach, to 517 Columbus Avenue. His suits were worn by mayors, by visiting dignitaries, by Frank Sinatra when he came through San Francisco. He looked at the jacket's buttons. His signature was wooden buttons, hand-carved from sustainable California hardwood. Each one unique, like a fingerprint. I stared at the buttons on Alex's jacket. 4 wooden buttons, leaf pattern. No two alike. Giovanni made approximately 300 suits in his career, the old man said. Every one a work of art. I know this because I was his business partner from 1970 to 1982. I watched him build that business stitch by stitch. He turned to my mother. And Patricia was his only daughter. Born 1962. She grew up in that atelier, playing among bolts of fabric, watching her father create beauty. I turned to face my mother. My whole body was shaking. Is this true? My voice cracked. You told me your parents died before I was born. You said I had no grandparents. You looked me in the eye and lied. My mother was crying. Silent tears running down her carefully composed face. Did you lie to me? She whispered. Yes. The word hit me like a physical blow. And then the memories came, one after the other. Like photographs falling from a shelf. I'm 6 years old, in kindergarten, working on a Mother's Day project. Everyone is drawing family trees. I ask my mother where Grandma and Grandpa are on her side. She kneels down and smooths my hair. They're in heaven, sweetheart. They went there before you were born. We only have each other now. I drew angels, where grandparents should be, and then the earlier one. The one I'd carried for 26 years? That vest. I looked at my mother. I was 4 years old in the attic. Navy blue. Wooden buttons. You ripped it out of my hands like I'd found a bomb. She nodded, barely. That was his, wasn't it? My grandfather made that vest. She nodded again. The pieces fell together like something I'd been assembling all my life without knowing what the picture was. It wasn't even made for me. I looked at the size of it in my memory, the way it had been snug, tied on a 4-year-old frame. It was made for you. When you were little. Giovanni made that vest for his daughter. My mother covered her face. You kept it for 30 years. Hidden in a box in the attic. One piece of him you couldn't throw away. And when I found it, when I touched something he made with his own hands and his own love, you took it from me and called it trash. My Aunt Rebecca, across the room, breathed. Oh my God, Patty. What did you do? Stress. Grandpa Bennett reached into the bag attached to his wheelchair and produced a folder. It come prepared. He read from a photocopy of a contract, dated March 14, 1982. Richard White, 24 years old, a recent Stanford Business School graduate, had approached Giovanni with an offer, a business partnership. He would invest $85,000 cash for 50% ownership of Castellano, bespoke, plus the right to modernize operations. Giovanni's atelier was valued at $200,000, the old man said. Richard's investment was supposedly for expansion, new location, staff, marketing. He turned the page. Hidden in Section 7.3, page 8 of a 12-page contract, was a buyout clause. Either partner could force a sale of the other's stake in cases of, and I quote, material breach of management duties. At fair market value, as assessed by an independent arbitrator, selected by the initiating party. I looked at my father. You were 24 years old in 1982. Where did you get $85,000? He said, quietly. A family loan. Grandpa Bennett shook his head. His parents were middle-class teachers in Sacramento. He borrowed it from 3 different banks, using falsified income statements. The fraud began before the contract was signed. 6 months later, September 22, 1982, Richard White filed notice of material breach. He claimed Giovanni had failed to implement modernization strategies, refused to delegate design authority, and obstructed business development. Scam was simple, Grandpa said, his voice flat with old anger. Giovanni's 50% share was based on a valuation worth $100,000. Richard's chosen arbitrator, his former business school professor, valued Giovanni's stake at only $40,000. Physical assets only. No goodwill. No trademark. No reputation. Giovanni was forced to sell for $40,000. Lost $60,000 in value. Worse, Richard retained the trademark Castellano bespoke, the client list, and the storefront lease. 3 months later, Richard sold that trademark to a New York luxury conglomerate for $180,000. Total profit for Richard, Grandpa said, $140,000 in 1982 money. In today's terms, approximately $380,000. I turned to my mother. My stomach was ice. You were 20 years old in 1982. You were in college. Dad was 20. You were dating him when this happened. Grandpa nodded. Patricia was a sophomore at UC Berkeley, pre-law, when Giovanni received the partnership contract. He didn't understand all the legal language. He asked his daughter, his brilliant daughter studying law, to review it for him. He looked at my mother directly. Patricia told him it looked fine. Sign it, Papa. This man loves me. He wants to help us. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before. Something low and broken. When Richard filed the breach notice in September, Giovanni called her, crying. He begged her to look at the contract again. She told him she couldn't get involved in business disputes. He pulled out another document. A timeline precise as a ledger. September 1982. Giovanni loses business. October. Richard receives $40,000 from the forced buyout. November. Richard sells the trademark for $180,000. December 18th. Richard and Patricia marry at San Francisco City Hall. Reception at the Fairmont Hotel. Patricia's father not invited. January 1983. Giovanni evicted from his atelier. I said it out loud because I needed to hear myself say it. You married him with your father's money. You went to Maui on your honeymoon while your father lost his home. And you didn't even invite him to your wedding. Grandpa Bennett's voice dropped to nearly nothing. I visited Giovanni in June 1983. His last client had been in May, a father of the bride who wanted a suit for his daughter's wedding. Giovanni charged him $200. He used to charge $2,000 for bespoke work. He gave the man all his remaining fabric as a gift. Told him, beautiful things should go to people who appreciate them. It's not rot in storage. He pulled out one final document. Probate inventory. Giovanni's final possessions. A studio apartment. In the Tenderloin, $450 a month. 2 months behind on rent. Bank account, $340. Assets, 1 sewing machine, 1 cutting table, a box of tools, 3 bolts of fabric, 1 photo album. Debts, $8,000 in medical bills and back rent. He paused. Funeral county cremation. No service. August 15, 1983, Giovanni collapsed in his apartment alone. The landlord found him 2 days later. He looked at my mother. You didn't attend the funeral? You were in Napa Valley with Richard. Wine tasting. Alex stood. And the room turned to him. He pulled out his phone. He was calm, a kind of calm that wasn't cold, but certain. Mrs. White, you asked what I do. You called me a man with nothing. He turned the phone toward the room. A Bloomberg terminal screenshot. Dated January 10, 2026. I'm Alexander James, Bennett CEO and majority shareholder of Whitmore Luxury Group, a private equity firm specializing in heritage fashion preservation. We own 23 heritage fashion houses across Europe and North America. Our portfolio is currently valued at $4.3 billion. The room erupted. Uncle Charles Harrington, the man my father had positioned as my sensible alternative, gasped, Whitmore Luxury. You're that Bennett. My father stood. His face a deep, mottled red. That's not possible. You live in Hayes Valley. You drive a 1985 Mercedes because I choose to, Alex said simply. I don't need a Bentley to know who I am, Mr. White. He pulled up another document. In January 2024, Whitmore Luxury Group acquired the trademark Castellano, bespoke as part of a heritage brand preservation initiative. We paid $1.2 million for it. Not because of its commercial value, because it represented a master craftsman's legacy that had been stolen and sold for parts. He paused. During due diligence, our legal team discovered the full history of how that trademark was originally taken. The 1982 contract. The fraudulent buyout. The forced sale. All of it documented in San Francisco Superior Court records. Then, his voice changed. It softened, just for a moment, and he looked at me. I didn't know you were Giovanni's granddaughter when I met you. I fell in love with you because you're brilliant and kind, and you value the same things I do, preserving beauty, honoring craft. He turned back to my parents. But when I realized the connection, 8 months ago, I had a choice. I could have exposed you immediately, pursued legal action for reputational damage, destroyed you socially and financially. But I love Stacy, and I wanted to give you the chance to be decent human beings. He touched his jacket. So I wore this suit tonight. One of only 11 surviving pieces Giovanni Castellano ever made. I wore it as a test. He turned to the room and told them the rest of the 300 suits Giovanni had made in his career. All but a handful had been lost, seized by creditors, auctioned, destroyed by time and neglect. Alex had spent 12 years tracking down 11 survivors. This one, purchased at an estate sale in Marin County in 2023 for $15,000. From a widow who had no idea what her late husband's jacket was. Total spent on Giovanni's 11 suits, $340,000. Over 12 years. He looked at my mother, not because of the fabric, because of the hands that made them. You own 11 of my grandfather's suits, I whispered. And, in 2023, Alex said quietly, I donated 3 of them anonymously to the DeYoung Museum. I wanted you to know your grandfather's work, before you knew he existed. Everything clicked. The 3 Castellano pieces in our permanent collection. The ones I'd spent weeks researching. The ones I'd labeled Artists Unknown. The exhibition I'd curated on master tailors of North Beach. I wrote about my own grandfather, I said. My voice was very small. And I called him Artist Unknown. My mother made that broken sound again. I turned to face her fully, for the last time that night. You spent your entire life telling me to appreciate quality, to value legacy, to honor craftsmanship. My career, my entire career, is built on preserving the work of people like him. My voice didn't shake. Something had settled in me that I didn't quite understand yet. And you erased your own father from existence. You let me write artist. Unknown, on his suits. How many times did I ask about your childhood? About your parents? About my heritage? Every single time. You lied. Asterisk. I turned to the full room. All 26 people. Witnesses. Every one of them. Here's what happens now. I counted on my fingers. I'm marrying Alex. The wedding will happen on our terms. My parents will not be invited unless they meet 3 conditions. Non-negotiable. Public. Verified. 1. A public acknowledgement of what was done to Giovanni Castellano. It's not a private apology to me, a public statement, submitted to the San Francisco Chronicle. Admit the fraud. Admit the stolen trademark. Admit that a daughter chose money over her father. 2. A formal apology to his memory. You will visit his grave. You will place flowers. You will say out loud, in front of witnesses, that you were wrong. 3. Financial restitution to the Castellano Legacy Fund. In 1982, he took $140,000 through fraud and the sale of his trademark, guessed it for inflation to 2026. That's $380,000. I'm being generous. Investment returns would be $1.8 million. I'll accept $380. I looked at them. If you meet all 3 conditions, public acknowledgement, apology at his grave, financial restitution, then we can discuss rebuilding a relationship. If you don't, you will never meet my children. You will not be called grandparents. You will not be in my life. My mother reached for me. Stacy, please, you had 30 years to tell me the truth. You chose lies. Now you live with the consequences. I took Alex's hand. Grandpa Bennett wheeled himself toward the door. Cousin Jennifer stood. I'm coming with you. 2 more cousins followed. Aunt Rebecca looked at my mother with an expression. I didn't need to translate. 6 of us walked out. The exit time was 8:52 p.m. The party had lasted 2 hours and 22 minutes. 18 bottles of champagne remained unopened. 14 plates of filet mignon sat untouched. $18,000. Divided by 142 minutes. $126 per minute. As the door closed behind me, I heard my mother crying. It was the first time in my entire life I'd heard that sound. As the week after the party, the ripples spread. 12 of the 26 relatives reached out supportive, horrified. We had no idea. Uncle Charles Harrington, the man my father had seated at the head table, as my replacement option called for. Days later to announce he was resigning from the Pacific Heights Club and donating $100,000 to the Castellano Legacy Fund in Giovanni's name. The San Francisco Chronicle published a piece on January 28. Heritage fashion fraud resurfaces after 40 years. It ran on page B6, the society section my parents' friends read. Within 48 hours, the online version had been shared 2,300 times. My father's LinkedIn went private January 29. My mother deleted all her social media. By February 1, Gary Danko Management called a meeting. Membership. Under review. On February 8, I went to my childhood home while my parents were hiding in Tahoe. Maria, the housekeeper who'd worked for the family 20 years, let me in. I went to the attic, found a box labeled Patricia's childhood clothes. Donate? Never donated. Sitting there for 3 decades. Inside, the vest. Navy blue. 4 wooden buttons, hand-carved with leaf patterns. Size 4T, and stitched inside, in Italian, a label in my grandfather's hand. For my little Patricia, age 4, 1966. With love, Papawa. The vest was never for me. It was my mother's. Made by her father's hands, for her, in 1966. And she had kept it hidden. Boxed, unable to throw it away, and unable to face it for 60 years. I sat on the attic floor and cried for 20 minutes. Then I took it to Alex. He examined it the way I've watched him examine every piece of surviving craft, with reverence, with precision, with something close to grief. Look at these buttonholes, he said quietly. Each one hand-stitched perfectly even. And these buttons? He turned one over. He carved her initials on the back. PC Patricia Castellano. Before she became Patricia White, we had both pieces, professionally preserved and framed together. The vest and the suit. Both survivors of erasure. Both made by the same hands. I slept with the vest on my pillow that night. First peaceful sleep since the party. On February 22nd, a letter arrived. 6 handwritten pages, cream stationery. My mother's handwriting. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She said she didn't deserve it. She said she was 20 years old in 1982. That she'd told herself Giovanni would be fine. That he'd rebuild. She hadn't known what Richard would do. That by the time she understood, she was married and pregnant. A miscarriage I never knew about, and going forward seemed easier than going back. I know you think I chose money, she wrote. Maybe I did. But I also chose shame. I was so ashamed of betraying him that I erased him, rather than face what I'd done every day. Enclosed was a check for $10,000. Made out to the Castellano Legacy Fund. Not the $380,000 I'd demanded. A start. Postmarked Tahoe. I didn't cash it. Didn't throw it away. Put it in a drawer, and wrote back 1 page. When you're ready to meet all 3 conditions, public acknowledgement, apology at his grave, full restitution, we can talk. Until then, I need space. My father, absolute silence. His identity was built on being a self-made man. Admitting fraud meant admitting his whole life was constructed on theft. He couldn't face that. So he chose the identity over his daughter. I removed him from my emergency contacts. Asterisk on February 29th. I sat at my desk at the De Young Museum and opened a new document. I typed carefully. Proposal for special exhibition. Giovanni Castellano, Master, of North Beach, 1935 a 1983. Curator, Stacy White. This exhibition would honor a craftsman whose legacy was nearly lost, and whose story represents the countless immigrant artisans who built American fashion culture. Personal note. Giovanni Castellano was my grandfather. I never met him. This exhibition is my way of introducing him to the world. I attach the supporting documents. The research, the photos, the loan agreements, for all 11 surviving suits. From private collector Alexander Bennett. Then I hit submit. I picked up the framed photograph on my desk. Giovanni 1978, standing in his atelier, holding a finished suit, smiling. He had my eyes, my hands, my smile. I found you, Nano, I whispered. And now everyone else will too. People ask me if I'm angry. I'm not. I'm sad for what was lost. Not money. Memory. My grandfather poured his soul into every single stitch. My parents poured their energy into erasing him. And in the end, his legacy lives in museums, in scholarship letters bearing his name, in 120 artisans in 15 countries, learning their craft because a master who died alone in a Tenderloin apartment never stopped being worth honoring. Their legacy lives in a newspaper article, in a membership under review, in a daughter who chose integrity over inheritance. That's the difference between wealth and worth. I spent 30 years trying to earn my parents' approval, trying to be successful enough, polished enough, grateful enough. It was never enough, because their approval was conditional on my silence. I don't need it anymore. I approve of myself. And the vest Giovanni made for his little Patricia. It sits framed in our home now, next to the suit Alex wore that night. 2 pieces of a man I never met, but carry in my blood. Both pieces that survived erasure. Truth, it turns out, is the only inheritance worth keeping. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you felt every twist, every moment of justice landing exactly where it belongs, smash that like button right now, and tell me in the comments. What would you have done at that engagement party? Would you have walked out the moment your mother made that toast? Or would you have stayed and let the whole truth come out in front of everyone? And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Stories like this one don't come around every day. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Giovanni Castellano made 300 suits in his lifetime. Every stitch a choice, every seam a declaration that beauty was worth the time it took to get it right. This story is dedicated to him.